that binge eating is actually a very normal thing that's supposed to be happening. Like, it is more of a sign that you have a very strong habit-forming brain, which in the past would be very good for survival. Not so good for survival in our modern day where food is so easily accessible and we have all this. But just remembering that you're not broken and you're not alone in this. I know for me, for so many years, I felt so ashamed of it. But really, at the end of the day, all you're doing is eating food. There's nothing wrong with eating food. Yes, it might be more than your body needs, but when we take that shame bubble away from it, it makes it so much easier to get out.
Welcome to OTR, Over the Rainbow, Achieving Mental Health for Real. This podcast offers hope to many people who needlessly suffer from mental health issues. Your host, Bob Adelman, brings you information on how you can recover from any mental health issue and achieve a happier life. If you want to know more, please check out his trailer. Bob's notes on today's show follows.
Abila, through coaching and psychology, helps women stop binge eating and overeating by rewiring their brains so they can feel normal and in control around any food. Join us as we talk about techniques used to stop binging and listen to Amber's story when she herself suffered from this issue. Amber learned that there was nothing wrong with her and she just needed some simple brain tools to start making dramatic shifts in her eating habits and life. Amber explains that for years, she looked like she had it all together. Successful, driven, and health conscious on the outside, but secretly she felt addicted to food and couldn't stop eating. Her breakthrough came when she stopped blaming herself and started understanding how her unconscious brain was keeping her stuck in habitual eating patterns. Over 3% of the US population struggles with binge eating and so many more do so in silence. Amber is on a mission to make sure no one ever feels as alone and broken as she did on her journey by offering evidence-based solutions from someone who's truly been in their shoes.
Now, here's Bob with today's show.
Hello and welcome to OTR, Amber. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Could you just give us a little information about yourself and your brand?
Yes, I'm Amber Abila. I am a binge eating expert, so I help people rewire their brain to feel normal and control around any food. A bit about how I got into this line of work. But I first started struggling with food when I was in high school, and I went on my first diet, which was calorie counting. I had a strict calorie count, and I thought, okay, in order to lose weight, it's calories in, calories out. So I just need to eat less and move more, which is a very common approach that people take nowadays still. And when I tried that, I did lose weight at first, but soon after that, I started binge eating. And I remember my first binge so clearly. It was on 7 cookies around Christmas time. I had promised myself that I was just going to have one, but then I had another and another and another until I had eaten all 7. So I was eating more cookies. I was having these binges, and they started happening every day. And I thought I could just try harder, just use more willpower, just learn more about nutrition in order to get out of it. But it was almost like the more I learned about food and nutrition, the worse that it got. So I decided to go to therapy, and therapy is the approach that a lot of people will take if they're looking for this approach of mental health and psychology. But the problem that I had with therapy is I felt like we kept going to my past, and I couldn't really find this big trauma or anything huge that my eating issues stemmed from. And I felt like I had to just get all my ducks in a row and solve my entire life in order to get my eating issues solved. And so I got a lot of awareness through therapy, but it never actually solved my binge eating.
I am now on a diet, and this would be the first question I would ask you. Everything's fine. I eat better. I eat better things because I have a little bit of a heart condition. But my problem is between lunch and dinner and breakfast and lunch, I am absolutely starving. I think some of it has to do with the medicine I take for my mental health creates an appetite, and it's almost, I feel weaker. I feel, super hungry. And I noticed on a different show that you were on that you mentioned a way to get past that point where you could actually not eat instead of, running to to get something. I mean, I eat a healthy yogurt or something like that, or strawberries, but is there a way that I could not have these kind of cravings or be able to handle them better?
Yeah, so two things. First thing that I learned after therapy is truly the role of our biology and how we eat. So if you think about if you were to be in a desert and someone were to only spoon feed you little tablespoons of water all day, you would probably feel really obsessed around the water. You would sit by the water bowl all day. You would wait for your next feeding of water because it would be a scarce resource. And this is sometimes what happens when we are dieting is our brain is seeing that it's either perceived scarcity or food is actually scarce where we're not getting enough and we're not fueling our body properly. And when that happens, our brain will send out what I call biological urges in order to eat. Now, these biological urges are almost impossible to fight. And I'll talk about habitual urges in a second too, because there's the other aspect here of habit. But basically, if we are not getting in enough calories or enough food, it is really hard to fight any of those cravings because, again, it's your biology coming up, letting you know that it needs more food, that it's trying to help you so you don't die. So I always recommend that, if it's this true hunger, that we want to honor it. And that might mean we need to have a snack then. That could mean we need to beef up our meals a bit more, where we have either larger meals, like more quantity, or we have a higher quality. So we have more protein, we have more carbs, we have more fat. We have a certain thing that might be missing in there to really help us feel satisfied. And when we do that, what's so interesting is people always think that's such a small thing, but it often makes such a huge difference for someone. I've had someone who's been working with me for quite a while now, and she was really resistant to the idea of eating breakfast because she's heard about intermittent fasting, and she was really just stuck on this idea that she didn't need breakfast because she wasn't super starving in the morning and she could just push through. But what's interesting is when she started eating a breakfast, it drastically reduced her cravings for chocolate in the afternoon and evening. And that's because her body finally felt safe, that it had enough food previously in the day that it didn't feel like it needed to send out these strong cravings for these hyperpalatable foods of carbs and of sugar to make sure we're getting in enough.
So you recommend eating a lot at one meal? Because I always heard with diet plans, that's a bad idea. Like you should eat a little bit each time, maybe 5 times a day or something like that. Is it?
It's really up to the individual. I typically recommend 3 to 4 meals a day. So like a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and maybe like a bigger snack in there if you absolutely need it. But if you think about it, as humans, we didn't really start snacking until food manufacturers came about 50 years or so ago. If you look at how people ate 100 years ago, pretty much no one snacked. People had breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then they just went on throughout their day. If they were hungry, they didn't fear it, they didn't get scared of it, but they were also eating a diet of mostly whole foods. So if we are eating a lot of processed foods or a lot of like artificially flavored foods, that can also have an impact on our hunger signals as well and make us feel hungrier when we're actually not, because our brain is expecting nutrition to come in from all of these foods, and then no nutrition comes, and that can lead to this feeling of more hunger. So given that we are eating mostly whole foods, it's totally okay to have some treats in there as well, but given a diet of mostly whole foods, we shouldn't actually need to snack that much. And if we are, there might be some emotional reasons going on, some habitual reasons going on, but it's normal and safe to sit with some degree of hunger as long as we're getting in our food in our meals during those 3 meals.
Okay. Now, there's a difference between, like, when I get hungry, I have a snack. So that's different than binge eating. How come, what's the purpose? I mean, why do people get to be binge eaters? Is it something that they just inherited, or is it a trauma, or what could make a person, kind of addicted to food like that?
Yeah, so it usually starts out for most people, actually not from trauma, not from emotional reasons, but from dieting. Dieting is the number one root cause of binge eating, because a lot of people before they started binge eating, they weren't dieting. Now, this isn't the case for everyone. There is definitely like trauma can play a role in it. And if that's you do want to go to therapy first to work on that deeper trauma before you start really looking at your eating habits. But for the majority of people I work with, it was they started dieting, they're getting these biological urges to binge. And what happens then is then it becomes a habit. So this is really the thing that changed everything for me in my relationship with food is I came across a blog post that described how all of our eating habits are just that. They're just habits, meaning they can be changed. And when I applied that to my binge eating, I had a big insight where I didn't feel like it was this big problem anymore. It kind of shrunk down the problem to make it easier to solve. But I could also see how my thoughts around food weren't necessarily true. So when my brain told me, you need to eat a lot of food right now and it's going to be good, it's going to be fun, it's going to be pleasurable, I could see how that actually wasn't true and I could get separation from my higher self and my lower self that was going on autopilot here, which is where my urges to binge were coming from. So what tends to happen is people will stop dieting and then they'll think, oh, there must be something going on here because I am still binge eating even though I have stopped dieting. And a lot of times for most people, it's just the role of habit, of your brain trying to conserve energy, of a habit that it thinks it needs to survive. Because our brain is so sensitive to changes around food, because it doesn't want to die, it can be really hard to let go of that binge eating habit at first, because your brain is perceiving it as something that's necessary for our survival.
Okay. But if somebody starts binge eating, what do they have to do to actually stop it? Let's say they don't have any traumas that they're trying to reconcile. So once you start the binge eating, how do you stop it? Just willpower or just have the bigger meals? Is there anything else?
Yeah, great question. So definitely making sure you're getting in enough food is helpful. And that can look obviously different for everyone, but we don't want to be starving ourselves throughout the day. Like if we're hungry, we want to eat. It's okay to feel like some level of hunger for 30 minutes to an hour, but if we're going like all day long while feeling hungry, we want to increase that first. But then once we're doing it, that's where we want to look at the habitual side of things. So I have something on my website. It's an audio to stop a binge that you can find on my website, theconfidenteater.org. And in this audio, I go through a few reminders of what these urges are and how to get through them. So as a little overview here, your urges, again, are coming from this habitual part of your brain. It's like running like a record player. It's not indicative of who you are, of what you really want. It's just your brain trying to save energy by doing the same thing it did yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before. So because of that, we can start to see the separation between how it's not our true self, it's not something we actually want to do, and how these thoughts can't hurt us. Anytime we're getting a craving for food, it is just thoughts running through our brain that are creating sensations in our body. And we can handle thoughts running through our brain, creating sensations in our body. It is something we are totally capable of doing. We do it all day, every day. For example, you see a cute thing at Target that you want to buy, but you decide that you don't actually need it, so you don't buy it. That is a beautiful example of how you can sit with this desire for something and not act on it. And our urges are the same way. And what's really cool is once we stop acting on our urges to binge, our brain literally can rewire itself. And that's why I say I help people rewire their brain, is because I don't have that same desire to binge now that I used to 5 years ago when I was still struggling. And that's because every time we do or don't do something in our brain, it's like we're taking a vote. So every time you binge, it's telling your brain, this is a habit I want to keep, and this is something I want to make sure you continue to remind me to do forever and ever. And then every time you don't binge and you get triggered and you don't eat, that is an opportunity for your brain to update that neural network and to say, this is not something this human wants to do anymore. And it can literally decondition that brain pathway to make it so you don't want to binge anymore. So every time you get through the binge urge and you don't act on it, it's really important to celebrate yourself and say a little like, go me, I'm so proud of you, you did it. Because this mental celebration is like neural superglue in our brain where it helps the new habit stick more. A big mistake I see people making is they get through the urge to eat and they just say, oh, like, thank goodness I got through that, moving on. But if we don't celebrate after we do something that we want to be doing, it's not going to make it stick in our brain so much. So it's not going to have the same power of changing our brain as it could.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you on that, but how do you self-celebrate? I mean, I don't know. Unless one way is to have food that you like.
Yeah.
What would you do to self-celebrate? I mean,
Yeah, so
I
celebration
don't.
can just be an emotion in your brain. So I say the word celebration loosely, like it doesn't mean you have to go have like an actual party or go get a
Yeah.
massage and spend a whole bunch of money on yourself. Celebrating can just be this feeling of celebrating yourself and this feeling of pride. Because anytime we have a strong emotion, our brain pays attention to it. So if you think back to your childhood, you probably remember the first time you went to Disney World or something because it was exciting, or your favorite birthday party. When it was super exciting, your brain paid attention to it and said, ooh,
Mhm.
I am really excited about this thing. Or if you were really proud of yourself, you got a really good grade on a test, you got into your favorite college. You probably remember that moment too because you felt proud of yourself to a large degree and your brain paid attention. So that's how we can do that around food too, is like when we get through an urge to binge, if we just say in our mind, like almost imagining a mental party happening for yourself of, go me, I'm so proud of you, this is amazing. The emotion of celebration is actually creating this response in your body that will help your brain pay attention to what's going on and make it more likely it will want to repeat it.
Why do you think certain people don't get binge? I mean, I've been on a lot of diets and I never was tempted to go binge on food at all. Do you think it's just you were born that way? You inherited it? Is there a logical reason for it?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. It could be maybe your diets were not extreme enough to really trigger your brain to be scared that there is a like survival thing happening. It could also
Mm-hmm.
be that your brain is not perceiving it as pleasurable. That's another big thing because one of the biggest beliefs I help people change is this idea that binge eating is pleasurable or that it's helping you cope with something or that it's fun. And when people believe that binge eating is fun and it's exciting and they like the rush of it and the high of it and finally getting to let go of control, then it seems like something you want to do. So in people who don't binge, there's oftentimes this mindset of like, well, why would I do that? Like that wouldn't be very fun. That would cause my body a lot of pain. It wouldn't be very enjoyable. It would be like really miserable. I'd waste a lot of my food. And so they don't do it because they have a different story around it than someone who's binge eating. It can be something like, if you think about when you started binging, maybe it was a form of excitement in your life where life
Mm-hmm.
feels pretty boring and it's almost like a toxic
Right.
relationship where with food, sometimes you get the high, sometimes you get a low. And so it feels kind of like
Yeah.
this addiction cycle of like, I get this hit and then I get this low, similar to a toxic relationship. It can also, a lot of times when I see people counting calories, it can feel like a sense of control over their life. Like, if everything else feels out of control, but I can decide exactly, I'm going to put 175 calories in my mouth right now and no more and no less. It can feel like they have a
Yeah.
greater control over their life than maybe they actually do.
So you don't think I mean, what's the chances that you have some kind of problem in the past that's kind of causing this? How do you know the difference whether you have that? I mean, maybe you don't remember something that happened. Is that a possibility?
It is, and definitely, especially if someone had started binge eating like at a much younger age, it could be a
Mm-hmm.
possibility that something in the past has happened before. Something I do in my work in coaching, I also use aspects of hypnosis, which is essentially just relaxing your conscious mind enough to get to these deeper layers of your unconscious, which your unconscious mind does 95% of your brain's processing every day. So if you're not addressing it, you're missing out on a big piece of the puzzle. But what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting is what we found out through the research in recent years is there is this topic called therapeutic memory reconsolidation. And what we found through therapeutic memory reconsolidation is that our memories are very changeable. And we know this because we try to remember something and someone else will tell the story a whole different way. And we're like, no, it didn't happen this way, it happened this way. And that's because our memories are historically pretty bad. What this means for
Right.
changing our habits is that anytime we are triggered and we have activated this habit of binge eating, our whole neural network is lit up, meaning from the first time it started to the time it happened yesterday. And this is really good news because this means we don't actually have to go to the very first time the binge eating happens in order to change it. When you change how you think about your binge eating yesterday, or you change how you act to a binge urge today, that actually domino out affects the rest of the neural network. Even if when it's connected to, maybe you were 3 years old and this happened. You don't actually have to go to find that 3-year-old memory to change the neural associations with binge eating to it.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this something really concentrated on teenagers that do this, or you could start at any? You said you were 15. Is that normal starting time, or could somebody be 35 and start?
It can be any age. I would be interested to see the statistics of like when it starts. I'm not sure of that, or even if they have the statistics, because people can get help at various points in their life. Maybe they started binge eating when they were 15, but they didn't get help till they were 35. But it can really happen at any age, again, depending on when someone starts dieting. So some people, they become a mom or a dad, and then they go on like a super restrictive diet. And then they can start binge eating then. For most people I see, it tends to be more of a lifelong struggle, I'll say, where it started sometime in their teen years when they are becoming a woman and they are going through puberty and they're trying to start to control their weight to appear more desirable. And that can usually lead to a lot of issues with the relationship with food over the years down the line. But it often starts from these social pressures that women in particular especially have to be a certain size, to look a certain way, and wanting to control our bodies.
Yeah, that's a terrible thing. I mean, just the whole process of having to think that you have to be a certain way to be loved by someone that's a real problem in all of this. Whether you're binging or you're, not eating at all, anorexia, then both are just terrible situations. But you talked about one thing, trusting when you're hungry, or trusting your hunger as a signal to eat. How do you do that? How do you trust your hunger?
Yeah. Exactly? So a lot of people have really zoned out of their body, and we live in a very go society where all of our screens are taking us in all the time, where we're looking at our phone, we're looking at our computers, we're looking at the TVs, the iPads, all of those things. And that really disconnects us with our body. So even outside of hunger and fullness, most people don't know what emotions they're feeling. They don't know what exercise feels good to them, because they're really disconnected from what their intuition too. That's another thing. They're really disconnected from what their body is saying because there's so much in their mind and information world all day long. So getting into your body in any way, shape, or form can be helpful to start to relearn your hunger and fullness. So even doing something like that, where you're going into your body, or a lot of these mindfulness-based practices of tuning into your body, that can inherently help you start listening to your hunger and fullness, because you're creating this greater connection between your mind and your body. Now, I'm a really big advocate of mindful eating as well, where we're turning off of these distractions so we can sense these cues a little bit more. Because think about when we're eating distracted, it's almost like we're like putting a muffled sheet over it. So we can't hear it quite as much because we have so much other noise going on in our head around what we're doing today, about what we're seeing on our phone, on Facebook, and all these things. So I always recommend people to sit down with their booty in a chair, put their food on a plate, not eating it out of the bag, the box, and really taking like a couple deep breaths, asking yourself, if you were an alien, or if you're sitting with an alien, how would you describe this food to them? Because that will help you get really present with what you're noticing in it. And that alone will help you start to listen better to your hunger and fullness and sense where your body is at. Now, if someone is having a really hard time listening to your hunger and fullness, and they're also binge eating, there is some biological things that can be happening too, with just if there's a large amount of sugar and carbs coming in frequently, and then we are trying to listen to our hunger and fullness, those things can throw it off a little bit and give us this false hunger or fullness signal. So it is important to have this regular meal routine where we're eating mostly whole foods, again, some pleasure foods in there too, so we can get like a good accurate read versus we're binge eating and then we're eating nothing for 24 hours and we're having another binge and then another one. And so it can just make it a little bit more difficult in the beginning to do that. But that's why I actually don't teach my clients hunger and fullness until month 4 of my program, because I want them to do some of these other skills, such as learning how to eat in moderation, sitting with their urges, creating a better positive food mindset where they have an abundance mindset around these foods. All of those things can help you get to a place where you're not binge eating as much, and then it makes it easier to tune into your hunger and fullness.
Yeah, I love eating so much that I just look forward to it. during the day. I mean, that's how bad it is. But I try to not eat just if I'm not hungry.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's almost a case of boredom. Like, oh, gee, I can't have any snacks now because I gained weight or whatever the reason. And it's kind of like you get depressed about it. You're like, well, what am I going to do? What's going to replace that? How do I take my mind off of food, I guess is my question.
Yeah. So it's that thought right there of, I can't have snacks. Whenever we say we can't have something or we're not allowed something, that is going to lead us to feel restricted, because it's like the forbidden fruit now. It's like this thing that we put on a pedestal of, I can't have this anymore. And so if you're feeling restricted by it, then it's a good way to like tune in and say, okay, what might I be able to think that feels a little bit better? And what I often recommend for my clients is making it a choice. So I am choosing not to have the snacks for reasons I like. Now, if you're like, well, I'm not choosing it, so-and-so told me to do this, then I would have to reevaluate your reasons with you to make sure it's actually something that's important to you and you want to do. And a lot of people will say, well, like you said, for example, I can't eat the snacks because I'm gaining weight. And so I don't want to eat any more snacks because I don't want to keep gaining weight. Weight gain is something that happens over a very long period of time. And same thing with weight loss. Weight loss happens over a long period of time. So the problem with telling yourself that in the moment of, I can't have snacks because I want to lose weight, is it's such a long-term thing that our brain has a hard time conceptualizing it. And so oftentimes our brain goes then, well, I don't really care that much about losing weight. I just want the snack. So we need to find a different reason instead that is motivating for us today of why right now I don't want the snack. And so, let's assume that you're snacking when you're not hungry, because if you're hungry, we want to investigate that more. But let's say you're truly not hungry. You just ate lunch. You're feeling full and your brain's like, I want to eat more snacks. Then we can first look at what negative consequences do we feel immediately in that moment when we're eating the snacks. And is there anything we don't like about that experience? So for example, maybe you start to feel more tired in the afternoon then when you have the snacks, and it's harder for you to focus at work and show up how you want to show up. Maybe you're trying to do an afternoon workout and you often don't work out then after you have the snacks. Maybe you feel a blood sugar high and then a crash, and so it's just like feel really fatigued. Maybe you feel a little bit of a stomach ache. Maybe it's experience itself. If you feel like kind of out of control around food, it just feels like not very fun. You might feel guilty, ashamed. All of those things are things we want to pay attention to very specifically so we can show our brain how that experience not only isn't something we want long term, but isn't something that's going to be fun right now either. It's not going to be something that's enjoyable or desirable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is good advice. I personally had, I guess, a month or so I've been doing this, or 2 months, and I haven't noticed it where I get less hungry. Even though I've reduced my calories a lot, it still seems like I'm hungry the whole day. So is there, should I then say I can't have a snack? Should I start doing something else that takes my mind off of it, or meditation or anything like that? Is there anything I can do where I can prevent myself from eating?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, one is like really showing yourself the negative consequences that might happen in that moment. If it was something specific, like it sounds like with what you're describing right here, if I was working with you as a client or someone, I always have my clients do a food diary so I can look just to see nutritionally if anything is going on. Nutrition is not my number one specialty with people. I do more of the psychology, but a lot of times after doing this for 5 years now and working with a lot of people, I can usually spot little problems of why you might be hungry throughout the day and where we can kind of shift around things. So that would really be an individual recommendation for people. But if you are, again, like truly eating enough, we are getting in plenty of whole foods, we're getting in plenty of calories to not send our body into starvation and restriction mode, then what I would do is, I mentioned this audio that I have. I would use that, and in this audio too, I use visualization to help you see two paths that could be a possibility here. So visualization is a really powerful tool that is used by CEOs, executives, athletes. People will pay like $4,000 for a visualization with session with a specialist. And the reason why it's so powerful is because our brain does not really know the difference between a well-imagined experience and an experience that happens in real life. So this is why we will be like driving home from work and we'll have this whole angry conversation with our partner in our head. And then when we get home, we're angry and we yell at them. We never even had that conversation with them yet, but we just imagined it in our head. And so now we are creating the physiology of being angry in our body because our body or our brain is predicting that this thing is going to happen. And so it creates that response in that moment. They've also done studies where people, for example, have imagined playing piano for a month, and then another study actually plays the piano for a month, and they have the same improvement in their skill level, showing that our brain is really powerful and it can really show us what we want to be doing without even having to do it. So how I use this in my audio is I have you imagine taking two paths with seeing, okay, well, what happens if I were to eat the snacks right now? Let's fast forward to after it's all over and we're surrounded by the wrappers and we're feeling guilty and we're overly full. And then when we do that, we can see the negative experience, but it's also really important to show ourselves the positive experience. So then we can imagine like pressing fast forward on the experience. Maybe we sit with that discomfort for a little bit, but then we have an opportunity to change our brain where we can literally rewire that brain pathway in the moment to not snack as much and to be proud of ourselves and to be able to focus at work that day and sleep better that night. And then, far off in the future, have better health numbers at the doctors and all of that good stuff. So really showing ourselves the whole picture. I call this telling ourselves the whole story. So not just chapter 1, I eat the food, it tastes good, the end, but like what really comes after that in chapters 2 through 10 of that story.
Right. That's good. I guess the last question I would have is that my partner here is not dieting right now, and she has a real sweet tooth, and so do I. So things are in the house. Okay. A lot of times if things aren't in the house, I have an easier time to resist. Is that something you should do? Like just not bring things like Oreo cookies and muffins and corn muffins. I mean, is that something that you really should just get out of the house if you can? Or is it, doesn't matter. This will work. This method would work anyway. Is that
either way, depending on the person, what matters most is your mindset around these foods. So if you decide I don't want to have these foods in the house, okay, great. But the truth is these foods still exist in the world. So they're still going to show up at birthday parties, at weddings, at graduation. You're still going to see them in the grocery store. You could always stop by fast food, at the gas station. Like all of these foods are still going to exist. So if we don't do anything to change our mindset around them, we're still going to struggle in the same way. I've also seen people then they like start binging on fruit, for example. They give themselves permission to like, okay, I can eat whatever I want, but then they haven't really addressed the mindset around food, so then they just binge on something else in the house.
Yeah, I have like 10 strawberries at a time. I'm trying to not do that, but strawberries are so low calorie. It works for me, but yeah, I think I could easily binge eat because if I have a bag of potato chips, I eat the whole thing. So I have to keep things away from me, out of the house. I don't even see them. That helps me. I don't know.
Yeah.
If that's a good technique.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It can.
So you would recommend that. Just don't buy the Oreo cookie. Just don't buy them.
Yeah, but again, we want to see what intention we're coming from. So if it's coming from this place of fear and scarcity, then if there's Oreos ever at a party, you might be like, oh my gosh, I never get those Oreos. I want to eat them all right now. And then we end up overeating them. So I think it's a balance. I do teach my clients how to eat anything in moderation in my Confident Eater program. And we do a really structured step-by-step process. I call it my trigger food process of learning how to include these foods in your house. So we don't just like bring in every single food imaginable and make our cabinets into like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but we can learn how to have these foods in amounts that feel good to us. And we know that it's possible because there are still natural eaters around the world who will do something like have a couple of chips and put the bag away or leave chips behind. And I know when you're in it, it can feel like, oh my gosh, that's impossible. I can never do that. And I was there too. But I've now become one of these natural eaters. And so that's what I teach people is like, how do we change our mindset around these foods and get into abundance mindset? Because a lot of times we're overeating around them too because we're scared of them going away. We're scared that the diet's going to start tomorrow, that someone's going to tell us these are off limits. So we want to just like get it in all right now and say, screw it, I'm just going to eat them. because, I'm going to be good tomorrow. I'll get back on track tomorrow. But if there is no
I do
track
that.
or no strict rules around it, then it makes it so we don't feel that pressure to get it in all right now because we know we could have it again later.
Right. Yeah, those are excellent. It's excellent advice. This part of the program is just for you. If you wanted to, is there anything I missed, or if you want to drop some of your links down, you could do it now if you like.
Yeah, so the last thing that I want to share with people is just really a reminder that you're not broken here, that binge eating is actually a very normal thing that's supposed to be happening when we are dieting, when our brain is getting in a strong habit. It is more of a sign that you have a very strong habit forming brain, which in the past would be very good for survival, not so good for survival in our modern day where food is so easily accessible and we have all this. But just remembering that you're not broken and you're not alone in this. I know for me, for so many years, I felt so ashamed of it, but really at the end of the day, all you're doing is eating food. There's nothing wrong with eating food. Yes, it might be more than your body needs, but when we take that shame bubble away from it, it makes it so much easier to get out. So if you want to learn more about me, you can find out more about my website, theconfidenteater.org. That's also where I have my audio to stop a binge, which I would highly recommend. Thousands of people have used it. They found it super useful. So I would highly recommend checking out that. And you can also find me on Instagram at The Confident Eater, and I have a free Facebook support group called Become a Confident Eater, as well as a podcast of my own called Become a Confident Eater.
That's terrific. I thank you for giving time out to talk to my listeners. I'm sure they'll heed your advice. I hope they heed your advice, because that's part of having mental health, that you're eating right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I really appreciate you coming on, and have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.